it's true that you were a Dutch elm disease project surveyor for the California Department of Food and Agriculture, correct?
Yeah, so when I was trying to make my way into reporting full time, I needed to make money, and one of my first jobs was there was a Dutch elm surveying project trying to root out trees, identify trees that had the disease. So I signed up for a 6-month stint, and it was pretty cool. They gave us a uniform, and they assigned me for unknown reasons to drive one of the big high ranger trucks. So me and my partner Steve would drive through the San Francisco Bay Area, identify trees that could be diseased, park the truck, shoot the stick up 75 feet, then take samples of the tree and take them down. And it was a job that neither of us were at all qualified for. I did crash the truck once as we were driving through a rich neighborhood called Atherton. But it was eye-opening, and it paid the bills, and it did expose me to as we were talking about the political aspect of agriculture and trees, because in this case there was a political impetus to get rid of the disease before it spread, community-wide.
Was this like a serious, because I haven't heard of Dutch elm disease before. Was this like a serious
thing? We
did
a good job in wiping it out.
Okay, fair enough. Was it like a very quick spreading, serious problem?
Yes, it was a chronic problem.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, what became more politically incendiary was at that same time there was what was called the medfly infestation.
Mm-hmm.
Medfly is short for Mediterranean fruit fly, and it spreads very quickly. It's an insect, and it can wipe out any number of specialty crops. And in California, where specialty crops are $1 billion industry, the necessity of clamping down on the spread of medflies is highly significant. So actually, we began doing some side work on the medfly project as well.
That I guess kind of shows that there's always been problems with infestations. I know, nowadays we have the red lantern flies. Especially, I'm from New Jersey.
Okay.
That's a massive problem. I remember 2 years ago, when I was touring universities, they were just stacked up by the hundreds when I was in New Brunswick. It was terrible. It was disgusting. And I remember, there was the campaign to step on them, and you end up having these giant, just piles worth on the street corners. It was.
Well, and it raises any campaign against invasive species can invoke important questions of public health. And in the case of the Mediterranean fruit fly, more than the Dutch elm, the politically potent farm industry in California wanted to spray a pesticide called malathion to wipe out the insect. The communities that would be sprayed in Palo Alto, which were very rich communities and hence had some commensurately strong political influence in Sacramento, didn't want the residents sprayed with the poison. So there was a considerable struggle. And I think that was my first exposure, because I was writing for the Palo Alto Weekly as a freelancer at the time, my first exposure to the clash of interests, in this case, between the agriculture industry that wants to spray and the community of residents who want to avoid getting poisoned.
Huh. Is that tends to be a common occurrence when it comes to addressing these kinds of issues, where
conflict over resources is the eternal issue, which has been the center of my reporting really for a long time. When I came to Washington D.C. in the McClatchy Newspapers Bureau, writing primarily at first for the Fresno Bee and Modesto and Sacramento Bee newspapers, one of the key issues was the allocation of water. And in that case, farmers wanted water diverted to the crops, and environmentalists and other resource advocates wanting water, retained in the rivers for the sake of salmon and endangered species. So conflict over resources is inherent and everlasting.
Excuse my ignorance if I mischaracterize. I'm curious in talking about water rights. In California, I think it was they blew a couple dams to have water flow to more traditional areas and stuff like that throughout the countryside. I'm curious what your thoughts on that were and the impacts of that.
Well, there are a couple of things going on. Damming, one of the great stories of the colonization of the West involves the Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation and their construction of dams and building of infrastructure to deliver water from where it started to municipalities and to farms, and in the course of doing so, made the West bloom and also destroyed river runs and habitat for species like salmon and so on. And so that was counterbalanced with the environmental movement, perhaps beginning in the 1960s and 70s, to reallocate, redistribute water. And as part of that, there was a proposal to get rid of some dams up in the Klamath Basin and Northern California and Oregon and in Maine and a few other locations. To do that, it's very complicated and it's expensive. And to critics, it's a waste of water. It's sending water, down into the ocean instead of to where it belongs with farms. So it's and this is going on right now. In the Klamath Basin, there are four dams that were targeted for elimination. I think just in the last year, the first of them was taken down, and there's still years after this was authorized opposition to it.
Well, then what's the argument that was supporting the idea of getting rid of the dams? Or these certain dams?
Well, it's to restore habitat for endangered species, salmon and other fish that rely upon the rivers. When the rivers were being diverted to irrigation purposes, the salmon lacked the habitat to survive. And so, because the society, through its political representatives, had placed a value on habitat restoration and specific species under the Endangered Species Act and other measures, that society decided that it's worth the cost to protect these species and the habitat that they rely upon. So that is an enduring fight. And so right now, stepping up to the Trump administration, dominated by interests that want to support the resources being diverted to energy production and agricultural production, and this is going to be the conflict that we face over the next 4 years.
Yeah, I definitely it's going to be a big debate. I remember seeing there was a protest at Yosemite where they put the flag upside down at El Capitan.
Yeah, there was a slightly different issue, but it was an absolutely remarkable moment for those who haven't seen the picture. In fact, when I first saw it, I thought it was photoshopped, because it was so extraordinary. There's El Capitan, which is this great massive rock face, famous mostly for its grandeur, its beauty, and the men and women who climb it.
Have you ever been there?
I've never climbed it, but I've been there, several times, and it's absolutely stunning. And from the top, I don't know how they did it, but apparently Park Service workers or former Park Service workers or their supporters had draped a massive American flag. And it was a sign of not so much of resource protest, but of protesting the Trump administration's wholesale staffing and probable resource declines for national parks.
Yeah, I was reading into it. I think he's gonna well, it's my understanding that the National Park Service tends to be usually underfunded relative to what they need to do for their conservation efforts. Is that true?
Every agency is underfunded, if you ask them. But certainly the National Park Service has a long-standing deferred maintenance backlog. It's billions of dollars of work that needs to be done. Another sister agency in the Department of the Interior, the Fish and Wildlife Service, is underfunded, and as a result of this lack of resources, decisions are delayed in protecting species and in protecting habitat. And that fear that we're not devoting enough resources to this natural resource protection will be aggravated during the Trump administration, where they have different priorities and are also reducing staff. So what are already long delays in decisions will be aggravated. What are already long waiting lines for deferred maintenance will get longer as well.
And do you think, because I remember seeing on Instagram when Trump was elected, there was a lot of people posting on Instagram bye-bye national parks, there's gone. I don't know if like I don't necessarily know if I believe the hype of like whether or not, but do you think it's very plausible that like resource extraction and stuff might start encroaching into national parks?
Absolutely. I mean, and this is not a value judgment. I as a reporter, I do my best to steer clear of taking positions, but just taking at face value, the Trump administration's priorities are resource extraction. They want to make the Trump administration leaders talk without any hesitation about making this an energy dominant nation, lifting the restrictions, whether they be environmental or other restrictions on the ability to extract, whether it's critical minerals or water for agriculture. So you'll hear what to me sound like alarming statements of bye-bye national parks. And that's, I think, you can criticize what sound like extreme statements. It's undeniable that the conflict is swing over resources is going to be very vocal over the next couple of years.